this isn't appropriate. And there was a lot where I would cringe and it was people would being tortured on page and
And we're not talking about like a little knife in the gut, okay? We're talking about hours and hours and hours of torture with details. Welcome to Morally Gray Babes. We're your hosts, Jen and Amber, two unapologetic book addicts diving deep into the steamiest dreams, hottest book boyfriends, and those spicy moments that make you blush.
Amber here, and we're not just here to talk plot twists and character arcs. We're breaking down everything from our favorite quotes to the spice levels that really bring the heat.
Expect a lot of laughs, a little cussing, and some seriously hot takes. Whether we're gushing over fictional men or dishing out the truth on what books deserve the hype, nothing is off limits.
So buckle up, Buttercup, and get ready for real, raw, and totally unfiltered book talk. Because we're the book besties you didn't know you needed.
Hi, Amber.
hey Jen. All right. Today we're diving into a book, Not My Sin by Jen Bullard. This is book 1 of the Unhinged Verse, and they are 3 books in total. I will say that this is a dark reverse harem, a megaverse story filled with triggers. The alphas grovel hard, unaliving anyone who hurts their omegas. I'll say that.
Literally. Let me just put literally. Okay.
And we'll say the blurb, we'll say the triggers, we'll say some notes about this book that the author gives at the beginning of the story. I will say that I went into this book completely blind, even though I knew that the title was book 1 of the Unhinged Verse. I did not fully appreciate what that meant. So, Jen, do you want to read the blurb or should I take it?
Go ahead and read the blurb.
Okay. So here's the blurb. I've been a kept Omega for longer than I can remember. My handler bought me from my parents when I presented at 10 years old because he likes his Omegas young and innocent. Yes, it's just as bad as it sounds. Now my life is pain and misery, but it's routine, so it's manageable until my handler announces he's selling me at auction. The hormone suppressants aren't working anymore, and I'm simply too old for him now. I'm shaking in my skin as I wait my turn to walk across the stage when I smell the most delicious scent. Why is fate such a bitch? Somewhere in the crowd of lewd, loud, screaming men and women is my scent match. My past is not my sin, but I don't know what the future has in store for me. The author makes note that this is completely fiction in an alternate universe. Many things sound familiar, but others will not. She talks about alpha, beta, and mega being used often. She even gives a little bit of a description of the megaverse and what that looks like. She does make a note to be advised these alphas are not sweet. They are dark, depraved, and crazy. If you like your alpha sweet and your omegas to swoon, this is not for you. She also
And it's not for you. If
We'll
that's
we'll talk about the triggers in 5 seconds. So, because I know Jen wants to make that known before going into this episode. So, first thing is that once you get past that little note, she does give a Spotify playlist. And there's 14 songs on it. And I remember looking at the playlist, sending it to Jen and being like, I'm not sure this is the book for us. And I was like, they have 2 songs like Taylor Swift, Shake It Off, and Bop by Hanson. I was like,
and bye, bye, bye.
and Bye
You're
Bye Bye by
through.
NSYNC. And I was like, this is not
This is
like,
too cutesy is what I thought.
yeah, I
I
was like,
I thought we were going into something that was gonna end up being cutesy, and
I'm
it
like,
was not.
"Oh, dark and unhinged. Okay, but MMMBop is on the playlist?" That's not until I got to where MMMBop is actually talked about in the book, and I understood fully why it's on the playlist and why this is still a dark, unhinged Omegaverse. So,
Yes.
she mentions that this is a dark Omegaverse, which triggers may include whew, beheading, penis Picasso, which I didn't fully understand what that was until it's described in the
Mm.
book, so Ouch. That's all I gotta say. I should have just stopped. But beheading, penis Picasso, thoughts of self harm, sex trade, flashbacks of child abuse, torture, child and adult abuse, graphic unaliving, abused Omega, kidnapping, mafia, nodding, heats, touch them and unalive, groveling, pierced alphas, scent matches, and offer things that may be triggering to some. So, your mental health is important. We never want anyone to be triggered. If this sounds like the book or the episode that is not for you, please stop listening and come back for another episode.
At the end of the book, the author, in her acknowledgement said this, and this is something I wish that was in the front of the book. I'll just put that out there. It says, "Thank you." There's a lot of more, acknowledgments, but at the end it says, "Thank you to you, my readers, who continue to take the leap with me and trust me to fix things in the end. My sadism knows no bounds, and I'll find new ways to rip your hearts out after falling in love with my characters." And that is exactly this book, because I do like these very bad characters. Um,
Yes.
not bad to our main character. I'm also great well, I mean, no, they were bad. I'm also grateful that they didn't dive into the details of the sexual abuse when she was 10, 'cause I don't think I could have read that. I think it would have made me put the book down. But everything was implied, and you probably created worse things in your head than what would have been written on paper. But that was something that I think we both struggled with,
I
right?
did.
With the
I did. So I will be honest, when I started going through this book, I just skipped right to the like I saw the playlist. I was like, oh, I'm gonna check that out. I skipped right over the triggers because I didn't really think a lot would trigger me. For sure.
You learned
I
something.
learned. I learned my boundaries. And then I saw the dedication and I really liked it. And the dedication was when you're staring at your blackest night, look for the light. A tiny
I love that. I
I
love that. I love
did.
it.
I loved it so much. And then I just dove in and I remember Jen started reading before me because she was like, I don't know if I can keep reading. She's so young. And I was like, oh goodness, what is
What
happening? And then there was parts in the book where I actually had to put it down, and I was like,
many, many times.
I can't read this in public. I can't read it with my kids around because I have young children, right? And I was like, "Okay, this isn't appropriate." And there was a lot where I would cringe and it was they would people would being tortured on page and
Well, and we're not talking about, like, a little knife in the gut, okay? We're talking about hours and hours and hours of torture with details.
yes.
It was hard.
It was very hard, and, it was hard for me, especially going in not knowing, so I would kinda look at the page, I'd be like, "Okay, where are their quotation marks?" So, I know, like, I have to read what they're saying, but I can skip the gory details, and but here's the interesting part was that I loved the story.
Mhm. And I loved the ending. So it is a very dark book, and it's dark most of the way through, but you root for the female character. She grows stronger, and it was, you know, getting over bad people and still living a good life type of story.
Yep,
But it was ho and the writing was beautiful, like, not beautiful, the writing was very
it's
talented.
well done.
To make me like these characters, it was great writing. I'll
Yes.
just put that out.
I agree. I thought the story flowed beautifully despite the unhingedness of the flashbacks and the mafia involvement, right? So, with some things I loved. I love the obsessed and protective alphas who had to grovel after
Oh,
hurting their
yes.
omega. I was one of
Mm.
my
And not hurting her physically.
well,
Hurting well
she was
well,
physically harmed by their actions, but they
yes,
didn't cause her the harm itself.
yes.
I don't know how to say that well.
Yeah, well, that's good.
The way they hurt her was intense and traumatic, and I do love how they groveled and sought forgiveness. I just wish it lasted a bit longer.
Yes, that she made them work more,
Yes, that's
harder,
I
long.
loved how strong the female character was,
Yes.
and
And I loved her transformation from not believing in herself and weak and, like, eyes down
yeah,
to running people
yep.
around, like, making decisions.
Well, I loved how strong she was, but also how her heart for like I loved her heart and her empathy for others despite what she went through. And you caught a glimpse of that at the very beginning whenever she fought back urges for her scent match and leaving the pack so she didn't hurt their already bonded Omega. Like she was making this decision, even though she knew it would hurt her, she didn't want to cause harm to other people.
To that Omega in particular,
Yeah.
that was she very much bonded with him. So for Omegas, Omega-verse type books, I guess it's not typical to have 2 Omegas in a pack. So this I liked that, or at least I haven't read any. I liked that this was sort of a unique perspective, and I loved how the writer was creative and gave me enough details to, like, know what's going on, but not enough to bore me
Hmm.
or make me sick. It's the uniqueness of the story and of the pack and of these 2 Omegas. I love how, same as you, obsessed that the alphas were.
Hmm.
I like that each alpha bonded at a different time than the
I
others.
have thoughts on that.
Oh,
Well, you go first. I would
yeah.
say I felt like with this story that you could see where everything was headed. So the
Mhm.
third act plot twist wasn't that much of a shock to me. I felt like
Um, you didn't think it was like, I thought it wasn't a shock that some a plot twist was gonna happen, that's very typical in books. It was a shock to me, like, to the level of what happened. I was not expecting that.
I was
Okay.
like, and I don't know, maybe it's because I read a lot of Omegaverse. I thought the story was really well done. I thought like, okay, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen here. I knew, like, certain actions that she did I don't wanna give it away, right? So,
No.
certain actions that the alphas did to protect their omegas before this 3rd act plot twist, like, I could see what was happening, and you knew she had to overcome her handler, right? Um, I don't wanna say his kidnapper because he didn't kidnap her, he bought her. So, her handler, her torturer, I don't know what else you call him.
Thick, twisted fuck. Sorry.
So this guy, like, you know,
Threw it out there.
she has to stand up for herself and, like, protect herself against him, right? Like, you could see that coming to the extent that it happened and, like, the way it happened, like, I felt like I should have been more prepared because of how the book was in the very beginning. I wasn't.
I
I was
agree.
like, "Whew, that's a little intense." And a lot of intense, like, I'm just, like, grabbing, like, my sweatshirt collar, like, "Oh my god."
I could not read it before going to bed. I
Oh.
did one night and I had nightmares. So I like, this is, yeah, this is
So,
hard.
I did love the alphas once they started groveling, once they like, everything started to click into place. I felt like she accepted all of them too quickly for my taste. I would want
Yes.
more groveling, like, I felt like it was just, like, a day or 2, and she looked up.
And it was a long book. Let's just put out
It
there,
was a
it
long
was a longer book.
and so I
Yeah.
felt like she forgave them rather too quickly for my taste. The only one, the last alpha to bond, I loved how he waited until she fully accepted the whole pack and was
Yes.
comfortable before he committed. Even though it felt like he was putting distance, he was trying to do it for the right reasons. And so I really liked that. I feel like that was a really nice touch. I also really enjoyed the other Omega, which was a male, his humor and his comments, which I felt like broke up the tension in the book, right? So you're going through this very high tense situation, like it's torture and gore, and then all of a sudden he says something like, "I was stigmatized," and I just start laughing like, "Oh my gosh, it's so inappropriate." Okay, keep going. And I love that. I loved how his character broke up that tension. So Those are things that I loved about this story.
Let's talk about one thing that I wish the character did and you agreed. And there I'm not going to go into detail because again, we don't want to give the book away. However, she has a different name than her original name.
Oh, yeah.
And Amber and I through the whole book were like waiting for her to have a new name.
Okay, so her name in the book is Ren, right? And that was a name that was given to her by her capture, not capture, handler, torturer, whatever. And so Ren to me is a small petite bird. And then I Googled it because I was like, what's their personality? And so the personality of a Wren is supposed to be strong spirited and quite aggressive when it comes to their nest. And I was like, well, that's fitting. But at the same time, I loved that it was her name. However, the man who tortured her for a decade gave her that name. I was just hoping at the end, whenever she finally like stood up to him,
Right.
she like gained all her power back, that she would make the decision to like, and once she bonded with her new pack, like that she would rename herself to finally like rid in all acknowledgement from that time. Like, I'm a new person. I will rename myself. And I guess I was just hoping for that
Mhm.
moment
So
where
was I.
she would, I don't,
Taking her power back by giving herself a name.
yes, because she makes
Yeah.
a quote in the very beginning. Where is it? Let me see. I have it saved. And it's a quote that shows just like the pain and the turmoil that she faced and like
Beheadings?
her
Or
exhaustion, but also a little bit of her resiliency. She says, Horley Rivers is a little girl who died the first time Trey hurt her. I died the first time he blanked me, and I continue to die piece by piece every day. The world seems to enjoy throwing me into the fire just to watch me burn. I'm so fucking tired. And so
I felt tired for her the whole book.
So when she says that, and she says like, this little girl is dead. Like this name is dead to me. I guess I just wanted Ren to die too, not like
Right.
not the female character,
The name,
the
yeah.
name. And I think that was the one thing that was just, I was hoping there was going to be like an epilogue or something. That's
I
that
know,
she
I know.
changed her name, but
I love how she built the characters. She
Mhm.
did an incredible job with the 3 guys and then the main character, 3, right?
four guy, well, three alphas and an omega guy.
Yeah, yeah, so I'm saying, like, 3 alphas, yeah, and then the omega. So there were a plethora of nicknames.
Little one, darling, sweetness, lemon drop, half pint, and little dove. And I was like, oh, Lord, there's like, I did like the name lemon drop.
I loved it.
I love that. I thought that one was,
And little one too. I liked it because it was the other omega that called her little one, so it just fit really well.
and they only called her half pint like once. I
Yeah.
just thought it was so cute. And I wish that character would have kept up with it, but he didn't. I was like, oh, sad.
I love her smart, like, witty things that she said.
One of the questions, and maybe somebody read the book and they know and they saw it and I missed it, but it's like, when does she get her ears pierced? So I know that it did go really
Things
wrong.
that Amber wonders when she reads a book.
I even put a note in it because I was like, the author makes a note about it, about these alphas giving her jewelry, and they made a comment like, and this is just me going off of memory, which could be good or bad. But they make a note like asking her, what are your thoughts about earrings? And she was like, oh, I used to have my ears pierced, but they closed up over time because, she was unable to
Mhm.
get, unable to wear earrings. And there's like, okay, whenever we have time, we'll have a professional do it if you want to. And then at the end of the book, she absolutely has no time to get her ears pierced. Let's just say that. There's so much happening. And then they present her with jewelry, and if I read correctly, it's earrings, and I'm like, "When did she get her ears pierced?" Also, I said about the playlist, but when you get to the chapters, the playlist totally makes sense, and I will never listen to Bop again without reading that scene again in my head.
Correct.
Some of the torture scenes, fine, all of them, were a bit heavy for me to read, and the flashbacks themselves were challenging to get through. Although, like we said, the author's writing was fantastic and it absolutely brought everything together. I will now read the trigger warnings before reading a book.
Oh, yes. And I will say she's a talented writer
Mhm.
to get us to like
Yeah, this hingedness.
yes.
That's what they say. So you get a lot of different points of views in this book. For me, it felt like it was really heavy on the female main character, obviously, and one of the alphas. So there's Shaw, Everest, Ambrose as the alphas, and then the other Omega is Flynn. And Flynn was like, sporadically placed, which I thought was good. I loved hearing his insight, but I felt like it was just really heavy on Everest towards the end. And for me, I think I would have enjoyed more of Shaw's perspective because
Yeah.
that was her scent match and he was kind of like the main alpha. And
Yeah.
I guess I expected to hear more from him and not more from Everest. So that was a little odd to me, but it's just my questions when I'm like picking a book apart and thinking about all the things I liked and things I question about it, right? There's nothing right or wrong.
I would have loved an epilogue too.
Yes, that would have been nice. I was kind of
Like
hoping for it.
like so throughout this whole book, these alphas didn't think, right? Like literally, like they'd be like, "Oh my god, we put her in a basement yesterday and nobody thought to feed her." Like
Or it gets cold in Minnesota and the basement's the coolest room and she's wearing lingerie.
one of those things is Flynn keeps getting the text messages from the friend that she makes, and I'm like, "How come this girl doesn't have a cell phone yet? You guys are billionaires. Get her a damn cell phone."
She doesn't even know how to use it. She doesn't even know what's up.
Who
I
cares? At
know, but
least
I'm
she
just saying, like, yeah. It was something I found was confusing was getting there was a lot of characters involved. And this was a megaverse that had scent match mates, right?
yes.
And I just got really confused on the sentence because when you read it, initially smells his scent match and he mentions smelling lemon and lavender and vanilla. So obviously you're like, oh, lemon pound cake, right? Like in my head,
Rebel.
that's what I
Really?
think about. And because you try to like put these smells towards something. So you're like, oh, every time you see this person, you're like, pound cake. That's what they smell like. And then throughout the whole book, they talk about lemon and blueberries, and I'm like, "Who the F smells like blueberries? Like,
I
where's
know.
this blueberries coming from?" I was like, "Who is it, Flame?" Like,
I was like, it must be a mixture of 'em. That's, like, the only thing that I could think. I don't
because they
know.
said other people smell like orange and I forgot, orange and spicy, and they kept saying orange and spicy and lemon together, and I'm like, "Okay, that's the other 2 guys," but and they're like, "And blueberries." I'm like, "Who's blueberries?" Got confused. That was the only thing, unless I read it wrong, which is possible, but we could talk
Yeah.
about our
I'm
quote.
putting it down a lot, so
Yeah, but
a couple of things that I loved to hear,
that's
like, scenes, they're talking to her I keep saying attacker, but whatever
we'll
you
see.
call
I
him.
called him a
Yeah,
handler.
there you go, the handler. And so this is Flynn sticking up for her, and he said, "She's right. Our alphas refuse to force her to do anything," I tell him. "Only assholes with tiny dicks have to force omegas to be as subservient to them and with an alpha command. Sorry about your dick situation."
See? It's humor, just made
Like,
humor.
makes you laugh in a situation that you're like, WTF? And then you're laughing. It was a book that I struggled with myself. Like, why am I laughing at this?
I was. I mean, there was some parts that were funny. I like how you go all the way to the back because of the book, because
Yes.
mine started at the beginning. When you read
I just picked one of my favorite ones. I have 18,000.
oh my gosh, there were so many. So one is like in the blurb when she says, "My past is not my sin, but I don't know what the future has in store for me." I just felt like it was the theme of the book of survival, uncertainty as the female main character sought out freedom in this new future, right? So I like that blurb. The and then this is one of those where she's in this horrible situation, but she has like that dark humor, which if you ever I don't know, been put in that situation where you have to have dark humor to survive. And a little backstory is that I worked in emergency medicine, and there's like you sometimes you have to have dark humor to survive, right? To get past the trauma that you're witnessing.
That was my husband as a firefighter, same
Yeah,
thing. He
and
had
it's not like it's not something you
humor.
would do in public. It's just something that you would
Mhm.
do with the people that you're around to like get not to like be emotionally detached, but
To
just
relieve
help.
that
Oh,
stress
it's
that's
so
in your body.
yeah, it's so intense. And so she goes, I'm in a warehouse in Jefferson City. They're here to buy an Omega. Shuddering, I ask myself which God's Cheerios I must have pissed in because that's the only explanation for my scent match to be here. So she's there at the auction in like gaudy lingerie, right?
And a collar.
And a collar, and she was brutally attacked beforehand. And now she's going on stage and she smells her scent match and she's like, whose Cheerios did I piss in? Like for this.
Exactly my point of laughing
Yeah.
when I was like, "It's not a laughing situation." The author was really good at writing.
Yes, because I think the next chapter, she says something where the alphas bid on her and everything. Obviously, you get that from our talk, but one alphas is like, "Oh my god, why are you not speaking? Like, can you not talk?" And she thinks to herself, she's like, "I don't speak, asshole, because I don't feel safe. Words lead to mistakes, which leads to pain." And it was just like,
I literally have the exact same.
yeah, bro. I think it's because like it's in that moment,
It's
really,
that
those 10 years, like what she went through.
for her to find a sense of humor or to make things lighter by saying these punchy little things, I can imagine that that helps her to not take in the gravity of the situation, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, it was effed up. That's all I gotta say. And then she says to Flynn, whispers and prayers don't mean much to me. She whispers as I step back and she shuts the door. Like, so when she's leaving, like, that's what she says. And I'm like, oh,
Then our other favorite one I know because I talked with you about it too,
you're
is Flynn is basically talking to the alphas and saying she killed him, and like the gentleman that I am, I held him down.
Listen, I love Flynn. So the one thing that Flynn said to her right at the very beginning, when everybody learns that she's Shaw's scent match, Ren's like, "Are you mad at me?" And Flynn says, "No, it just means I get to keep you. You can be mad, you can make us grovel, but you're ours, little one." And I was just like,
And and I will say once they got over their assholeness, they said that to her all the time. Every chapter, one of them was saying, "You're mine, you're ours, we love you." Like, even when she wasn't ready to reciprocate, and I loved that.
"I need you."
I loved those.
So I love when the guys are really protective, right? It's kind of
I do too, but yes,
I mean, I like a
that's her
badass heroine, yes, but I like a badass heroine, and then she has men that are protective of her. And so it's that when she's being examined by a doctor, her scent match Shaw's thought was, I'm a paranoid son of a bitch on a good day. Today is not the day to push me. I was just like,
Woo!
I know I liked it, but then I was like, how many times do we feel that way? Like today's not the day. Like today's not the day to aggravate me or like I don't know. I was like, "Yep,
Eh,
I feel that."
so so she ends up finding, I think, salvation in helping other Omegas like herself. And I loved the support that the alphas gave her.
Yes.
And she said, God, they're probably going to get up to so much shit as they shake up our society. And I can't fucking wait to see it happen.
I
Like
know.
their support of her is, I have to be honest, their support of her and love of her after they stopped fucking up is the only reason why I got through that book. I will say, like, I don't know if the writing wasn't good and they didn't, like, obsess over her, I don't know that I could have finished the book.
I I don't know. I loved Flynn. I love Flynn. I mean, the guys were obsessive and protective of both their Omegas. I love that. They were brutal. I love the storyline. I love how the underlying of the mafia was tied in there and that played. I did not like the sex
Oh,
trafficking stuff. That is not my like, I do not like it. Read about it, nothing.
from the torture.
Horrific, and the torture was brutal. Like, and we've read some dark romances,
This is the
torture,
darkest
but
I've ever
this
read.
torture was pretty intense. I feel like Flynn's character really made
A little lighter.
it lighter. One, her dark humor, like while she's going through these intense scenarios, helped lighten it. Their obsessive love for her after, like, once they start groveling was great. Flynn's, like, his light made it for me because they just get through this horrible scene together, and where they're both abused. And he says to her, "You're apologizing for breaking through an alpha's bark with sheer will and saving me?" Yep. Makes perfect sense for my delusional murderous Omega. And we're just like, it was like, put in some perspective, girl. Like, you're a badass. Like, own it. I liked Flynn, and I thought it was a well done story. I felt like the flashbacks and the traumatic abuse, even though it was dark and intense and at times too intense for my taste, I felt like the story was well written.
Yes, for sure. If it was bad storytelling, I would definitely not have read the book. I mean, I would have put it down. It would be a DNF or do not finish.
Yeah. So
Race car.
so for me, the spice range was, whew, let's just go there. So the spice range for me was like between a 4 and 5. There were a lot of flashbacks of sexual trauma, which isn't spice. It's just sexual scenes, which were
Just
warranted
that.
for the story, right? That's it. However, these flashbacks are not for the faint of heart. I was cringing at times. And I hit my limit several times, like I said, reading where I would want to skim the pages, looking for those quote marks to make sure I wasn't missing key points. But the spice scenes, which made me lean towards a 4, were typical for an Omegaverse, specifically an Omegaverse with 2 Omegas. Like, it was spicy. And there were times where I would box Jen. I needed those wooden model statues to help me visualize the body placements because there was just too many. I was like, I don't understand this. I don't understand how blank and blank is doing this and blank is doing that. And then where's blank?
And how did they turn his head and do something else
How
to
did she
someone else? Like,
violently
how would
work
that
this,
even
like, in this
Yes,
position? I was like, do they just not have
yes.
thighs? Like, my thighs would be in the way. I was like, I don't understand. I was very confused. In certain
So,
situations, there's too many bodies.
for where did you land on the spice?
I said it was a 4 for me. It was a 4 mainly because I don't think those flashbacks were spicy. Like, I thought that was just
Yeah.
trauma.
I was gonna say the same thing. I would say it's on the par of 5 in terms of
Whole book is a 5.
the amount of spice, right? Because there was a lot of it, but because of the dark nature, I gave it a 4.
Yeah.
So, who that's just how we rated. All right, overall rating?
I felt like this book was hard for me to rate. As a book I would normally read, it was a 3, and I'm not saying that, like, bad, right? So my basically, I read a book 3 to 5. 3 is I like it, 4 is like I love it and would recommend it. 5 is like my Roman Empire. And I would say if you're going into this knowing it is a dark, twisted Omegaverse, it's a solid 4.
Correct.
The storyline was
Do you think
fantastic. But just the flashbacks and the childhood trauma that the female main character endured was intense and gut-wrenching, even though I know I just did not know that going in, and I like, if I did, I think
Yeah,
I'd have, like, a better rating for this, but since I didn't, like, let me just say, it was a solid 4 for a dark, unhinged Omegaverse holding a darker, complex storyline. That's what you're craving. But if you want a fluffy, sweet Omegaverse, this isn't for you.
yeah. I would
So
say that I would normally give it a 4 because the writing was good and it
which it
was funny
character
and
development was good.
the author got me to like characters I would not normally like and all the things, but I always think of an overall rating as referring it to people, and I would not recommend this book to people unless they love that genre.
See,
Le
that's why it's
so
hard.
Yeah, it's
It's like
hard.
it's a 3 for me, but if you are looking for a dark,
It
uh,
would be probably a 4
complex
or 5 if
storyline,
you were looking for a dark, dark, dark story. This might even be a 5 for you.
yeah, so
And it's the darkest book I've read. So,
there you go.
I'll throw
And I think it yeah, I don't so here's the thing. If she didn't have that flashbacks and she didn't have that childhood trauma, I would
correct.
say that this was like the torture was kinda like gory, but it wasn't dark. But because of the
Correct.
flashbacks to her childhood, like, that was freaking
That
dark.
spot on.
So,
Spot on.
that's
And
how
where I live.
so, anyway, I feel like the next
Well,
book that we read is gonna have to be fluffy.
yeah, I was just gonna say, and let's point out that during this whole read, which took us longer than normal to
It was a
read,
big book. It was a thick
A,
book.
be A, because it was a lot of pages, but also B, because it was hard, so we tended to put it down a lot. This
Yeah.
is the longest time we've taken to read a book.
Mhm.
Throughout
Wait.
reading
Can I
it.
just put a pause?
Yeah.
We're saying it's the longest time it's taken him. We started this book 3 days ago.
We're two-day girls now, I think.
Oh my god. It was just so funny because I was like, we started reading this on November 2nd. Today is the 5th. And I'm like, so Jen, like, it's like 2.5 days of reading. But still.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole time we were reading it, you or I were saying, "We need a light read, we need a fun read,
Yeah.
we need a quick read, we need our heads out of this story."
Yeah. It was really good. It was just very like my heart was just like how does she put it? Like how does she you read the quote earlier.
Yes,
Well,
she said, "Thank you to my readers who continue to take the leap with me and trust me to fix things in the end. My sadism knows no bounds, and I will find new ways to rip your heart out after falling in love with my characters."
that
Spot
last
on.
sentence,
That
rip your
should have
heart
been in the beginning of the book.
yeah, rip your heart
Saying.
out while falling in love with the characters because that's how it feels. Like you just like, oh gosh. Whew.
Thank you guys for tuning in. If you loved hanging out with us today, don't forget to check the show notes for all of the juicy details and the links. And you can also join our chat for exclusive updates and behind the scenes goodies that you can find on our Instagram.
And of course, follow us for more spicy reads, hot takes, and unfiltered fun. Until next time, stay morally gray.